Welcome back to the next episode of Thoughts and Discourses on Digital Transformation. And I think we're actually going to have a great talk today. We have John Roth and Sean Gorrell. And we were actually having a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and it was all about hack yourself, or as Sean puts it, minimal viable use. So we want to talk about that. So let's first do introductions. John, do you want to go first? Introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hey, everybody. I'm John Roth with Work for the Ready, which is an organization transformation firm. Do a lot of system transformation during the day. I'm also an exec coach and trying to be a better human in the world. Live just outside of New York City with my wife and three kids and my new puppy Latka.
And Sean.
And I'm Sean Gorrell. I'm an architect, a technology architect with the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, which is the central bank of the United States. So I'm primarily a software architect, but I'm a part-time agility hobbyist, I guess.
Okay, thanks, guys. I really appreciate you coming to have a discussion. So maybe John, we talk about hack yourself, or Sean's got his minimal viable you, which I just love that concept. So you want to maybe talk about what your definition of hack yourself is, and maybe give a couple of stories.
Yeah, I reflected a lot from our conversation, and I love minimum viable you as a term. I think for me, what hacking myself has meant a lot in my life has been about um, thinking about what do I really believe, what am I really all about, and how do I relate to the world. And I find, I think a minimum viable you, sometimes that's like the minimum stuff that's essential to be who you are. But for me, I think also it's been actually raising my floor, and increasingly thinking about like what is actually possible for me and what's the standard I want to hold myself up to, and kind of raising my game throughout. And I think it's about being a better, more powerful, kind person in the world, and just finding different ways to do that at work
And Sean, maybe talk about minimal viable you, and what's interesting about that, I was talking to a product manager, and they were going on about minimal viable product, and they actually have a definition of minimal happy product, and I thought, well,
Great.
that's just great, because we always talk about minimal viable product, and a lot of times when we give it to the users, they're going, what the heck have you just given us, right? And I think getting to the minimal happy product is probably the next phase in the evolution. But talk about minimal viable you.
Right. I've heard that the described as delightful as well, minimum delightful product. But so what really kind of got me on this topic was so had been talking about agility principles applied at the personal level going back a couple of years. Um, and what got me down that road was the Peter Saddington quote around that you can't have an agile organization or a team if you don't have agile people. And so I'm like, okay, how can I apply these at the personal level? And on an MVP, so the way the textbook definition, it's the smallest thing that you can build that delivers customer value and as a bonus captures some level of value back to you, i.e. gets you paid. And so how I apply that at the personal level is and so where John talked about raising his floor, I was thinking about like what is the floor and understanding what your floor is based upon where you're at in the world. Because a lot of times, like if you think through this year of trauma that we've collectively been in, is you don't always have the capacity to have that highest or ideal version of yourself or that delightful version, but it's really understanding of about what's your floor, and when you're at that floor, what does that look like, and what are you holding on to, and what are you letting go, so that you aren't creating unnecessary stress when you're really not in a position to deal with it. But so I think about it so that my minimum viable me expands and contracts based upon my workload, what's going on in my life, and just what the general level of overwhelm is.
Yeah, I think one of the great aspects about that is how do we take care of the body and mind, and let's talk about the body, right? I'm a runner, and what I found is, I do these distance, I do a crazy marathon every year, and the day before I do a half marathon just to give that extra edge of needing to just run. And so I'm always tuned up in the summer about any tweaks in my body and then how you actually handle these tweaks. And John, you were talking about, you're a runner as well. You injured yourself. You want to talk about that? We thought that was a great story. We were just cracking up about it.
Yeah, well, I was like a lot of runners. I was trying to squeeze my running in, and the older I got, the more like just starting your workout and running as fast as you can is a recipe for getting hurt. And I was constantly tearing my hamstrings, calves, irritating things, and as when I was rehabbing it at one time, I read somewhere that jumping rope or doing light skipping was a good way to warm up, and so I just started this process of skipping. And as I got into it, I found that it was warming my legs up really well before I was running. But pretty soon, I started also just really enjoying skipping and doing various calisthenics, out in Prospect Park in Brooklyn. And I found that the various uh, things I was doing, the kinds of movements, I was actually doing a wider variety of movements, bigger range of motion, actually, pretty challenging in some cases. It was not only giving me greater variety in how I was working out versus like repetitive running, but it was also um, a lot of fun. I turn on my headphones, turn on some pop music, and just start doing these moves. And I just kept extending it longer and longer till these skipping workouts like became part of my routine. And I was doing them, 90 minutes to 120 minutes of skipping, and finding myself getting fit, getting my legs stronger, all in unexpected ways, unplanned ways. But feeling good too. Physically feeling better as a result of doing the skipping. I've been doing it about 2 years now, and yeah, it's one of those really pleasant surprises that who knew?
So yeah, there's kind of like a CrossFit kind of concept. I remember I was talking to a guy called Matt Carpenter, and he's won a bunch of races. He ran the Pikes Peak. He was the champion of Pikes Peak. He's got the course record. He won the Everest Marathon. So this is starts at Everest Base Camp. He's won that, and he was actually saying as he's aged, right? What he's found is he's needed to do more strength exercise. He's actually had to, instead of just running all the time, it was, he's had to do different exercises. Have you seen the same thing?
Yeah, definitely for me, that's been true. And for me, the big one is I never stretched when I played sports in college and running. It was always the thing that I dropped. And so I am, easily one of the top 5% least flexible people on the planet. Everything is stiff. So what I've emphasized a lot, and I've always, done strength training, playing football and stuff like that, but I have found definitely that, for me, mobility, is a big deal. So like actually taking time to either stretch or use mobility equipment, soft tissue release, all things that actually, help me down regulate my nervous system and actually relax my muscles so that they can recover is a pretty big deal. And that then has translated a lot to less injuries. I try to sit as much as I can, like cross-legged. I'm sitting right now on a little meditation seat. So yeah, that's made a big difference.
Sean?
Yeah, and being a person like a man of a certain age who's over 50, that is, I'm feeling that too. And so I remember like the first time that I had a significant injury that kind of held me back was when I was 40. And when I saw my orthopedist about it, his basic thing was he said, "Yeah, it sucks to get old." And so, but he started to like, so I went through physical therapy, but it started to, I started to have to learn like different things. Like John talked about stretching, but so that's when I kind of started to get interested in like yoga and these other things because he had to, is that you couldn't do that. And he
Right.
said that there's going to be, as you get older, there's stuff like you're going to wake up tomorrow and something that didn't hurt yesterday now is going to hurt regularly. And so you've got to kind of find those things. And it's kind of funny because I mean, you get in these well-worn patterns around how you work out. And I used to be like I was telling John that I used to be that all or nothing doer. That if something got in the way of the thing that I'd planned to do in that certain way, then I would do nothing. And what I've learned is to to try out different stuff. So one of the things I'm doing this year is I'm doing at least one workout from every Beachbody program in their entire catalog just to try it. And I
Got
mean,
it.
I'm doing some ridiculous like Brazilian butt lift and like things that are Zumba. Like there's a dance one on there called like Country Heat, and not every one of them, I mean, are gonna be great for me. But I'm like, let me try it out because who knows when that's going to be the thing that I need to do because I'm not as mobile as I was anymore.
Yeah, the other thing that is part of taking care of your body, and I'm very analytical, was we started, my wife and I started a keto diet, and that was, the first diet I've ever been on. And it was interesting because she started it first, and it's hard if you're on the keto diet and your partner isn't. Because here am I walking in with a big old bagel and she's just looking at this going, this is just wrong, right? So I started on that, and you have to measure your blood sugar and your ketones, and so of course, I get myself a blood sugar meter. We start, pricking ourselves every day or twice a day to measure the ketones. What was interesting is, especially because I'm a runner, right? I could fall off the wagon and have a bagel and or a couple of scones, and then the next day I could go out for a 10, 12 mile run, and my blood sugar would be fine. My ketones would take a little bit of hit, but not nearly as much. Compare that to my wife. If she had a nibble of a bagel, her ketones would disappear for a week. And even the blood sugar, when you wake up in the morning, my blood sugar was very low. Hers was, much higher. And so it's fascinating, what kind of foods would have a reaction. Everyone was slightly different on how they react to the food. So, what we figured out with my wife, for example, was she couldn't eat any sugars at night. Otherwise, the next day the blood sugar would be crazy. I could have a pint of ice cream and, the next day I'd be fine. And maybe because of the running or just more different on the blood types. What have you done about looking after your body from measuring or taking, vitamins and things like that? Maybe Sean, you want to go next?
Yeah, so what I've been experimenting with lately is heart rate variability. So I've got an Apple Watch, and one of the metrics that it tracks is HRV, or heart rate variability. And when I started tracking it, mine is like very, very low. And so I'm like, okay, what does that mean? And when I dug into it, it can be an indicator of like that you have an illness or that you're having like persistent stress. Essentially, like a low heart rate variability means that it's kind of like that your throttle is stuck, your stress throttle, so that when you take your foot off of it, it stays, you're staying pegged all the time. And so I'm like, okay, what could be the causes of this? And so I got a better tracker. So I got an Aura ring that gets like deeper into kind of heart metrics. And so what I'm experimenting with around it is the effect of sleep, like the length and quality of sleep, and then what's the relationship of like alcohol? Because during COVID, I think many of us have kind of upped our alcohol intake. And so I'm like, and so when I dug into the research, it's like, well, having alcohol before bed can mean that your heart rate stays up and takes longer to get to like a lower resting heart rate. So I started experimenting with that, and that's where I'm at in the experiment right now. Is I've taken out that kind of weekday drinking, and see what is the effect of that on my deep sleep and REM sleep, and then also and what's the effect of that on my heart rate variability. And I've got a couple of other pieces teed up to try around that, like resonant breathing, some kind of supplements, and some other. Since I do mindfulness meditation, like I'd already had kind of tried with that. But what I'm trying to do is isolate my experiment into a couple of like smaller chunks so that I'm not introducing too many variables at the same time to then I won't know like what's affecting what. So I'm doing it over a series of phases. And so far it's been kind of promising that like you can kind of see that relationship between alcohol and the quality of your sleep. And then also like I've noticed over this period of time that I've been tracking on this part of the experiment that my heart rate variability has gotten a little bit better. So my floor is pretty much the same, but my average and the max are like moving up. So that part looks pretty promising, but I'm interested to see what the next step shows.
Great. And John, you were talking about alcohol. You want to talk about what you've been doing?
Yeah, and what I haven't been doing, I think what's interesting about metrics and knowing is how, in my day job, probably your day jobs too, like precise experimentation is pretty important, and so teaching rigor in experiments is important. I kind of find myself in life hacking like in two camps. Like some things you can actually know just through how you physically sort of experience change, and alcohol is like a good example for me. Like, I was drinking at one level, which was, several times a week, and then dropped it basically to, I don't know, maybe 5 drinks in the last 2 months or something. And um, just the day-to-day experiencing of sleeping and waking up, like I can know without taking any metric other than checking in with myself, like I feel a lot better. And then on the other hand, there are certain like metrics that can tell you even more. And so I think that idea of like, what can you just know through your physical experience and sort of your life experience, and use that sensing to be like, this is good, this is just inherently better. I'm just generally checking in with myself and I feel better. And what data, actually is useful to conclude, or like where can you isolate? Sleep's a good example. I am definitely sleeping better since I started drinking less, and I'm waking up with more energy. I thought my pee was going to be a different color, but it's the same, and I don't know what to make of that. So maybe I need a measurement on that to know what's up. But that, I guess, I think it's interesting to think about like where are like actual concrete measures helpful, and where is like your physical experience sufficient?
Yeah, and with your body, it's such a complex machine that the trouble is you can't hang your hat on one metric or two metrics
Yeah.
or a dozen metrics, right? I can look at my blood sugar and I can look at my ketones and they might say, "Hey, you're great," but I can wake up feeling like, "Oh no, what have I done?" Right? And so there's so many metrics in your body. The big thing is being able to actually determine yourself how well do you feel, right? And that sometimes changes. I get up from my morning run, and sometimes halfway through my run I'll feel a tweak coming on, and I've learned over the years, right, if you have a start of a tweak coming on, you have to stop, you have to stretch it out, or you have to abandon the run, and just rest it. Otherwise, if you try and push through it, you're just going to be in a world of hurt. And from for training for a marathon, any kind of long break is just makes it a world of hurt during the marathon. And I and when I do Pikes Peak, any kind of lack of fitness is exacerbated tenfold, just because the sheer duration of the marathon. Do
Yeah.
you guys feel the same way about being able to check in with your body, and no matter what you might actually have done the day before or that day, being able to actually be more in tune with your body?
Yeah, so and it's funny that you talk about like that tweak and listening to that tweak. I've learned my lesson from not listening to it. So when I did the Chicago, I was training for the Chicago Marathon, I think in 2012, and ended up having that kind of tweaky feeling around a calf strain that where I just should have stopped. Like I felt like it was coming on, and I should have stopped and just walked it out, but I didn't, and ended up with a calf strain that pretty much ruined my Chicago Marathon. So I should have been listening to it and didn't. But now, enough time since that, I think that was like really the first time that I'd experienced that and not listened to my body. Since then, if I'm on a run and have that kind of feeling, you know what a calf strain feels like once you've had one. And then you just like shut it down and say, discretion is a better part of valor, and I'm going to try this again tomorrow.
Yeah, I've been humbled like 500 times, to the point where I finally now have the shutdown thing where I'm like, seriously, just stop immediately. And yeah, it just took 500 times, and I finally caught on.
And so the next aspect is really taking care of your mind, right? And there's a lot of aspects to mental health. There's about improving yourself, training, learning new things, and then especially in the COVID area, everything's changed, right? There's no the outlet of going out with friends, or it's significantly reduced. So what we've been doing to really take care of the mental health, John, maybe you can jump in and talk about some things that you've been doing.
Yeah, this is definitely for me. This has been the most helpful thing in my life is like really paying attention to myself. And that starts with my mind and what a trickster my mind is. I think for a long time, I didn't even realize how much anxiety, I was kind of operating from on a day-to-day basis as a way of being normal. And so the big thing I've been practicing with the mind is basically slowing things down through meditation, and just through, I try to live in the present as much as I can and declutter my mind of as much as I possibly can. It's kind of a promise to myself to slow things down through breath that I do, the meditation I do, but also moment to moment, just trying to be present and not letting a lot of thoughts distract me. And so it happens that my job requires that too, facilitate a lot of groups. So it helps me really stay in the moment and also minimize self talk. So I've got a pretty robust routine for myself around not just like the moments of the day where you stop and meditate, but also just kind of constantly checking myself during the day and noticing the thoughts in my head and saying, what is this thought about? Do I want this thought? Is this serving me right now? Where is this coming from? How is this possibly not true? And then making conscious choices about what I want to focus on and what are my intentions in the moment. And what that does for me in the pandemic is as I've been pretty low stress, to be honest, because I'm able to stay in the moment and know what I can control and what I can't. And that's helped me just live moment to moment versus like trying to predict when this is all going to end and all this suffering. Not to say it's been a piece of cake, but
And,
it's been working for me.
and how did you actually get into the meditation, and how long does it actually take for you to actually get into it? Was it a lot of practice, or did you fall into it quite quickly?
Yeah, I'm not much of a strong meditator, to be honest. Like I basically when I realized I had some anxiety, I somebody said you should try meditating, and I jumped on Headspace and I started the 10 minutes a day, and I just found that presencing was really useful. And so I don't meditate that long. I haven't been trying to build up to being able to levitate and meditate for 3 hours, but like I find just being able to shut it down for 10 to 20 minutes, and sometimes I will do it a couple times a day, just with that practice and that repetition of quieting things down with the breath, like that for me is like what builds resilience. And that I can turn on sitting by myself or walking, as well, and just kind of being in the present. So that's how I got turned on to it, and that's the practice that I've built that kind of serves me in a pretty efficient way, but really important way.
Okay, Sean?
Yeah, my story is pretty similar to that. So I use Headspace as well. And I think you'd be surprised how much you can get out of even 5 minutes of mindfulness meditation. Like right now, I think I'm hovering at like the 10. I had a period where I was doing 20, and so 10 is better than 5, and 20 is better than 10. But really, five will help a lot. But one of the practices that in there that I learned that I think kind of relates to what John was talking about is, so Headspace has a program on there around anxiety, and the practice that they teach you, it's called labeling. And what you're doing is when you have either thoughts or physical feelings, manifestations when you're in the practice, is you label it. So is it a thought or a feeling? And then just kind of what they're trying to do is, I think there's a misperception around mindfulness meditation that it's about shutting off your brain, and that's not the truth of it. The truth of it is it's changing the relationship with your thoughts and understanding that thoughts are not you, and then having that kind of almost like a spectator view, like your thoughts are on cars on a highway, and you're just kind of labeling what they are, right, and trying to figure out like where's this coming from, but not chasing it. Like you're not the dog chasing the car and going to catch it. It's just kind of the spectator going by So it really changes your relationship with it. What I found is that, so I'm a very anxious person by nature. I consider myself to be like the serial ruminator. And this has helped a lot. And to break out of those kind of cycles, this helps a lot. And you can even do it like, even if it's not an actual, like I've got Headspace up, you can be at a meeting, and if you're feeling kind of like spun up, is just really paying attention to your breathing can get you to that place and like take you to take you to where you need to be. And there's kind of an analog to mindfulness meditation. It's called resonance breathing or resonant breathing. That it's like meditation without the thought part of it. It's really just pattern breathing. And for people that have difficulty in slowing the squirrel brain down, it's almost like a comparable practice, but without the focus.
Yeah, it seems like there's that good feedback loop. First, you really need to concentrate on your breathing to calm your head down, and then sometimes you can just naturally get into it, and your breathing actually starts to calm your head down naturally. So it's that loop that tends to really enforce the meditation. The other aspect is really improving yourself. So, I'm a believer in lifelong learning. I work in technology. So, the nice thing about working in technology is it's always changing. There's always something new. And, I've been doing a lot of security. Came from working at the Fed and working at the clearinghouse. There was a ton of security things. So I've been actually doing some learning, training up on potentially doing the CISSP exam for security. So maybe John, you want to talk about what you've been doing as part of learning and improving yourself?
Yeah, well, I'm really lucky in that my day job is about, complex systems change and making the world more adaptive and humane, and nobody knows how to do that. And so that whole space of that is like constant learning. I'd say for me, like the biggest learning that I've been doing is about how we're wired, and how our the way we think and regulate our emotions influences how we show up. So I've been digging a lot into different philosophies of things like leadership, but also certain belief systems that are really about like building off a lot of people that think about growth mindset versus fixed mindset, operating from a place of purpose and joy and creativity versus threat. Just the idea that what does it look like to operate at your highest potential versus and from a place of purpose versus fear, and all the frameworks you can use to kind of orient yourself. There's a great framework I'd mentioned called the Conscious Leadership Group. They have 15 commitments of leadership and a lot of practices around those. So I've been learning a lot of different practices around that have been a whole lot of fun to apply day to day.
Okay, Sean?
Yeah, I'm kind of learning in some of those same spaces, but so one of the things that I do, that's a practice that's went back for a couple of years, is I do reading challenges to help get me out of those, because it used to be I would read basically sci-fi and fantasy, and that was like my sweet spot of reading. But somebody turned me on to the Book Riot Read Harder Challenge, probably like maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and then Pop Sugar. And what they do is like, here's a list of different reading challenges that are very much to drive you out of your comfort zone into genres that you would never consider, like that you wouldn't necessarily consider. But so that's something that I do every year to just force me out of that into new places, and to concepts and topics that I wouldn't have otherwise got to. And there's sometimes when there's books that you're like, oh my God, like, and they'll always put like a romance novel on there or something like that that's totally out of your comfort zone. But it's funny because even the ones like that when I see the assignment that I'm like, oh God, a romance novel, I end up finding something that fits that ended up being great. Like, so the first year I saw that ended up being The Danish Girl, which I don't know if you have heard that there was made into a film.
No.
But it was about the first successful gender reassignment surgery. So it was kind of a fictionalized account of that person and their relationship and the process. but it was super interesting. But I wouldn't have gotten there without this challenge. Is it burned me out of that well-worn path that I was so accustomed to into a new place.
That's great. I think we're about out of time, so maybe we'll go around and just any final thoughts, John?
I just appreciate first off, I appreciate that you can run a half marathon just to kind of cool things off before you run the big one. But I think for me, I just appreciate the this idea of knowing as a way of getting better, and how there's so many different ways to know yourself and get better. And yeah, appreciate being with y'all.
Okay, Sean?
Yeah, similar. I don't know. I mean, I get excited about experimentation and just thinking, toying with ideas of safe to try, and any of the things that you can do to challenge yourself out of those well-worn paths into the growth zone, kind of excites me. So I love to talk about it.
And when's the Minimal Viable You book coming out?
I don't know. I don't know that I'm that good of a writer. I write like smaller form, kind of like blog posts on it, but maybe someday. I get to do a lot of talks on it. I think one of my favorite parts, though, is getting to hear what other people's toolboxes are, because then I can pick up stuff to try out on my own.
Okay.
Skipping.
Yeah, like skipping. Yeah, I think we're all into skipping, and maybe in the dark I'll start trying to. I always
There you
worried
go.
about just falling flat in my face skipping.
The place to start.
Anyway, I think we're out of time. Just want to say thanks, guys. Really appreciate you showing up, and look forward to talking to you again.